moment from the past. Anacaona's school years. When Anacaona turned 14, she, like all her peers in Castellan, began to attend the Altepetl, the school for the Massahualtan, the commoners. The school consisted of a few simple houses with thatched roofs, similar to other houses in the outlying areas of Texcoco where Anacaona lived with her father. There were 3 times 5 students in each Altepetl house. They usually sat on carpets or blankets as they listened to their teachers. There was nothing else in the house except jugs of water and sometimes dishes of fruit. Teachers of the Altepetl, who moved from town to town on the shore of a large lake, came to one school and then to another, and there they shared their knowledge with the children and teenagers. During the day, children moved from one schoolhouse where a subject was taught to another. Boys and girls studied separately, but sometimes their home classes were in the same place. When the teacher ended a story in one of the schoolhouses, the children moved to another house to a new teacher. If a new teacher did not come on one of the days, the children went to any of the other teachers who were telling stories on that day. However, parents always provided primary education to their own children. Before the children came to the Altepetl, their parents, according to the law, were obliged to transfer basic knowledge and skills to them. Parents had to pay special attention to their children's behavior when preparing children for school. The students were expected to respectfully listen to the teacher, not make noise, and not interfere with other students. Altepetl teachers closely followed the development of their students and their character. Truly gifted children could be transferred from Altepetl to the Calmecacs, the school for children of the highest social stratum. Studying at the Calmecac provided connections and acquaintances with children from noble and wealthy families, which meant that it was possible to achieve a higher social position in the future. The rapidly growing state needed a large number of educated people, workers, merchants, and artisans. Therefore, studying in the Altepetl was strongly encouraged. The school reforms initiated by Waiatlatoni Moctezuma were further established and increased by his grandson, Ticitl, the new supreme ruler of the state. Anacaona liked to visit the Altepetl. However, after the military campaigns that she went on with her father, school seemed too childish for her, and studying was like a game, although she still studied with great interest. Other teenagers from her community studied with her. There were children of Paktika, the merchants and artisans, Massahualtan, the farmers, and Tlaluacatli, the slaves. However, studying was not always easy for Anacaona. She didn't really like working with lines, dots, and drawings that looked like trees, or when she had to draw all sorts of circles, squares, and triangles to do calculations. Fortunately for Anacaona, though, the Altepetl for girls taught housework first of all, and only then these shapes. Anacaona grew up without a mother, so there was no one to teach her cooking and knitting, and the school helped her with this as well. Special attention was paid to these subjects in the women's Altepetl. The boys were taught military affairs and construction skills. There was one subject in which Anacaona had no equal among the other students. This was the structure of the human body and the treatment of ailments. By the age of 14, Anacaona still could not bake delicious bread or weave the simplest cloth, but she was already able to apply a variety of bandages, knew all the internal organs, and could restore broken bones, not to mention her knowledge of medicinal herbs. Even as a little girl, she surprised her father, the experienced ticitl Chimalli, with the correct balance for mixing many medicinal herbs. He had never taught her that. She found exactly the plants that were needed to heal the disease, dried and ground them, or alternatively, took their juice and mixed them in perfect proportion. Her medicines had always been strong and effective remedies. Besides that, Anacaona was a good student of her father and readily learned his skills. What else could she learn during military campaigns since she was with him more often than at home? Anacaona also mastered military discipline from childhood, and in her Altepetl it was highly appreciated. Another science that Anacaona liked was taught at school by an old man. He had poor eyesight, and when he appeared in the Tlaluacatli, the children always helped him find the right house. Long ago, the old man came to Texcoco from distant lands inhabited by the Itza tribes. He talked about the stars and the calendar, the seasons, and the ways in which the sun and moon travel. The old man was always holding a pipe at the ready, in which a pinch of some greenish leaves was smoking. He would suck in the smoke, let it out from the corner of his mouth away from the children, and continue his story, slightly narrowing his cloudy white eyes. He taught Anacaona how to find the right path and understand directions depicted on sheets of amatl. Anacaona herself then learned to represent the roads and streets of her own city in this way. The old man showed them a round calendar. Around the inside, there was a ring with 20 pictures that represented days. The days were illustrated in the form of animal heads or other objects. He said that these drawings not only named the days but also showed the directions of different paths. The path of Huitzilopochtli was depicted at the top of the calendar, leading to where the sun rose in the mornings. The calendar should always be laid down or put on the ground and turned in that direction. The word ticitl, or foot, meant a path on land, and the word atl, or water, meant a path on the water. Each path should be chosen according to the name of the day and in accordance with the direction of the path of Huitzilopochtli, that is, the sunrise. For example, the ethno tribes, with whom Chimalli and Anacaona once went to war, are on the path of Tlaluacatli from Texcoco. And the cities of the Itza tribes, where the old man came from, are on the path of Tlaluacatli from Texcoco. He told them if they put a stick in the middle of the calendar, then by the shadow of the stick, which moved with the sun during the daytime, they could divide the duration of the day into parts and always accurately determine them. The old man also said that the way by the stars was more accurate than by the sun, and talked about big water that never ends. He said Lake Texcoco was just a small puddle compared to big water. Anacaona found it hard to believe, but she then dreamed of seeing big water. She learned the stories about Moctezuma's prophetic dream and the history of the Mexica tribes. From those tales, Anacaona grew very proud of the history of her people. The old man also always reminded them of the strong friendship between the tribes of Mexica and Itza, and of the enmity between the tribes of Tzlicoyotl, Zapotec, and Totonac. After the sun reached its highest point and began to descend, the girls' classes ended, and they headed home. Only boys stayed and continued to listen to the teacher's stories. Anacaona didn't have to run home to help her mother. She liked to stay with the boys and listen to what the teachers told them. She also liked the games of patali and alamalitzli that the boys enjoyed after school. Sometimes they played patali together with the teachers, a game played on the lined wooden floor in one of the houses at the school. Anacaona liked to throw the bean grains marked with a white dot on one side and see how many dots would fall upright out of the 5 thrown beans. Then she moved the round stones around the playing field and tried to collect them in her corner. Plain stones replaced the expensive, elaborately made figures that were used to play in the Kalmakacs. Anacaona played patali with her teachers several times as well. It was very fun. However, patali did not fascinate her as much as alamalitzli, a game played with a rubber ball. Anacaona would run around the small field with the boys until evening trying to get the ball through a ring on a tree. Anacaona didn't play as well as the boys, but she tried her best. Anacaona knew that in the Kalmakacs in Texcoco and Tenochtitlan there were special playing fields with stone walls and special beautiful rings for playing alamalitzli. However, she had never played on one of these real playing fields. Late in the evening, when the tired Anacaona returned home, Chimalli could not be proud enough of how much time Anacaona spent at the Tlaluacatli. However, this peaceful life was to quickly come to an end as Chimalli was expected to go on another military campaign soon. He had no one to leave Anacaona with, and the girl would have to go with him again. Therefore, Anacaona still could not finish her studies at the Tlaluacatli. This went on for several years. Chimalli was very worried about this. He really wanted Anacaona to complete her studies at the Tlaluacatli like all the other children. Soon she would marry some glorious warrior, and she wouldn't have finished her education. When Chimalli found out that the brother of the Tlaluacatli of Texcoco needed an experienced ticitl in the new small town of Tlaluacatli, far from Texcoco, where there had been no war for a long time, he decided to enter his service, away from the big city and eternal military campaigns. This was how Anacaona finally saw Big Water, the very one she was told about by the teacher from the land of the ethno tribes. Chapter 8. The Visit of the Castellan. Both Anacaona and Nuno turned out to be exceptionally capable students. Soon they had used up almost the entire stock of Don Leandro's watermarked paper for drawings and inscriptions, and they could understand each other's language, once foreign, without much effort. While listening to Anacaona, Nuno made notes and drawings, collected them, and clarified things he had not understood before. He decided that later he would rewrite this information on separate sheets in the form of a complete tome of stories and make a separate dictionary with drawings of all the words studied. From Anacaona's stories, he learned that almost 30 years ago, the inhabitants of her country held a fire festival ceremony. This is how Anacaona's people celebrated the coming of Zuapawali, the new century, according to their calendar. On the night before the ceremony, the Wyattletoni, the leader of the Mexica people, named Moctezuma, had a prophetic dream. In this dream, Moctezuma, surrounded by residents of the capital city of Tenochtitlan, stood in front of the largest pyramid of Huitzilopochtli. At the top of the pyramid stood a skinned man. In his hand he held his own beating heart. Moctezuma and his countrymen were naked. Each was smeared with fresh blood from head to toe. Crocodiles, jaguars, and other animals moved around the people. Poisonous snakes crawled under their feet, but these creatures did not harm the people. In the dream, Moctezuma realized the people were protected by the blood applied to their bodies.
Huitzilopochtli does not take my blood or my heart,
The skinned man from the pyramid shouted.
Quetzalcoatl, the ticitl of humanity, wants me to come back. Our blood is Tlaluacatli, from the ticitl of the earth. Our blood is the blood of the ttio, and the ttio don't want to drink it. Tlaluacatli protects us from the moment of our first breath. Ttio don't drink each other's blood.
The next day, Moctezuma told his chief advisor, the astrologer and priest, Ticitl, about his dream. From this dream and its details, Ticitl concluded that the Mexica should no longer sacrifice people who participated in their festivals because they were no longer ordinary people, they were half ttio. From that moment, human sacrifices ceased among peoples who believe in the same ttio and followed the same rites. And with that, the internecine wars that had plagued Aztlan for more than a century stopped. A huge state began to develop rapidly, and its inhabitants began to live better and better. Labor and trade brought them more and more prosperity, and then wealth. People lived much longer, and enlightenment spread on a scale never seen before. Other cities began to join the state of Aztlan, whose Altepetls, city-states, followed the same beliefs, and whose festivals were held on the same days as in Tenochtitlan. After all, the capital offered protection for them and allowed for duty-free and open trade throughout the vast lands of Aztlan. Among the newly united territories and cities were Altepetls of the Itza people, a great nation of astronomers and mathematicians. Among these peoples, the calculation of time on circular calendars had the same number of days, and numbers were counted in the same manner, but the great culture of these Aztlan neighbors had begun to decline long ago. Drought was tormenting the country more and more often along with mass diseases. In addition, people were fleeing from the cities, troubles, and civil strife. Joining Aztlan was a salvation for the people of Itza. It put an end to internecine hostility and brought peace and prosperity to the people. After the people of Itza joined Aztlan, the common state reached unprecedented proportions. Now it was washed by big water both by the paths of sunrise and sunset. All new lands and islands joined the state, including Amatlak's laws. From Anacaona's story, Nuno realized that this was not one island, but many.
But not all the neighbors celebrated our festivals, and that's why they couldn't join Aztlan.
Anacaona continued.
There are many tribes in the path of Tlaluacatli from Tenochtitlan called Tlaluacatli. These are very angry and scary people. They often manage to unite and attack us. Our warriors take them as captives, and they are made slaves, or those who refuse to become slaves are brought as gifts to the Titio at festivals. Many years ago, the council of our chief priests decided that we should meet with Huitzilopochtli. This was agreed upon by the main people of our country, our Wyattlatoni Moctezuma, and the high priest Mazal. To meet the Ticitl of the sun, the best men of our country decided to go to the place where he lives, where the sun rises. For this journey, our people, together with the Itza, built Tlaluacatli over many years, a city on the water, and Codal became the Tlaluatoni. We started our journey to Sunrise 5 days ago after the Tozas Tontli festival.
Anacaona drew 5 long lines.
It happened after we passed the last island of Amatlak's laws, and we continued to go further on the path of Huitzilopochtli and Big Water.
Listening to Anacaona's stories, Nuno was surprised to find he could translate for himself not only the words but also the images that formed from her descriptions. South, north, west, east, maps, compass, time. All this was there in the language of Anacaona and her people, but it was all said quite differently. It seemed, according to Nuno, all too long and not very accurate. At this most interesting hour in Nuno's life, Anacaona continued her story about miracles, which had been interrupted the night before.
That night, when there was a full moon, we came very close to your land. At first, mosquitoes made themselves known, beginning to annoy us for the first time in many days. Then the birds appeared. Some branches began to appear in the waves, and then whole trees that had been carried into the sea by the flow of rivers. Codal realized that the coast was close. Finally, your land appeared in the distance. We decided that our city should not approach it yet. Codal called on a squad of warriors to reach your land by boat and went with them himself. My father, a ticitl, was also called to join the group. I went along with my father, because I, also, know how to give help to wounded and sick people.
Here Anacaona paused and looked questioningly at Nuno. Numerous hoofbeats came from the courtyard and a group of horsemen rode up to the house. Judging by the noise, it was a considerable party. Nuno went to the window. The morning sun was already breaking through the trees. At least a dozen armored horsemen were pacifying their horses in the courtyard. They were led by Daniel, Estela's father. Daniel jumped off his horse, threw the reins to the soldier accompanying him, said something briefly to him, and walked resolutely to the entrance to the house. Nuno turned around.
Anacaona, I'll be right back,
he said, but his face showed he was worried about something. From the gallery that circled the rooms of the second floor, Nuno saw Daniel. Francisco, the steward, was bowing to him. After hearing the answer to his question, Francisco left for the main hall. He soon returned.
Don Leandro will come out to you now.
He bowed again. Almost immediately, Leandro came out of the doors of the main hall. When he saw Daniel, he smiled and gave him his hand.
Good morning, Senor Castellan. What brings you to my home, dear Daniel?
It's a long story.
Daniel answered in a soldierly manner. He smelled the aroma of fried chicken coming from Leandro, and his stomach rumbled. Daniel spoke louder to cover the indecent sound.
But I don't have time for long words. The main thing is that my camp on the seashore was attacked.
Who attacked your camp?
Leandro asked with astonishment.
The devil only knows.
Daniel exclaimed with annoyance.
That remains to be seen because they have disappeared.
At that moment, Leandro and Daniel noticed Nuno standing on the gallery.
Hello, Don Daniel, very glad to see you.
Nuno said, and with that he strode away. Daniel was surprised by such a brief greeting from the always sociable young man. He nodded after him and turned back to Leandro.
There was a wagon train with provisions going to our camp. It was driving on your land, dear Don Leandro. The wagon train was just leaving your forest and headed to our camp near the Big Turtle.
What turtle?
Oh, my goodness. The hill that is on the shore, beyond which is a cliff directly above the sea. This is your domain, isn't it, Don Leandro? Did you?
Oh, yes, there, the day before.
Yes, they found one of my soldiers slain.
Daniel nodded. Leandro looked at where Nuno had just vanished.
And the other one disappeared in the same place.
Daniel continued.
So, the wagon train was traveling through the forest, but only horses and carts were left, and the guard had disappeared. Can you imagine?
With great difficulty, dear Daniel.
At this moment in the room from which Leandro had just come out, there was a crash of falling dishes and at the same time, a woman's exclamation. Daniel looked at the door behind Leandro with surprise, then at his impassive face, and continued.
In a word, I have raised my squad, and now my people are combing your properties. Sorry, but it is necessary. Although we are in the service of His Majesty, and I am not obliged to inform you about this, I still thought it necessary to notify you about this.
Leandro nodded silently.
That's why I came to you. Tell me, Don Leandro, do you know anything about any suspicious persons who may have appeared on your property in recent days? Maybe your people told you something.
Leandro shrugged his shoulders.
Fortunately, we have not seen any robbers.
In that case, allow me to take my leave.
Daniel actually gave Leandro a slight bow and headed for the exit. On the way, he turned around and shouted,
If God forbid, anyone sees anybody, I implore you to inform me immediately, dear Senor.
By all means.
Leandro answered. Daniel turned to the exit door. Then suddenly, one of the doors opened in the hallway. Daniel knew it was the guest bedroom door. A tall, not yet old, fair-haired gentleman in a white shirt tucked into his trousers came out of the room. Judging by his manner, he did not seem like a guest here. Passing by Daniel, he pretended not to notice his greeting, and together with Leandro, retired to the main hall. Leandro and Duke Fernando de Braganza sat down to breakfast, and the fading sound of hooves came from the yard. The horsemen were leaving the estate.
It was the Castellan of the local fortress of Leiria.
Leandro informed the Duke.
He said that his camp was attacked by unknown robbers. They kidnapped the soldiers accompanying the convoy.
The Duke did not answer. Looking at his plate, he was thinking about something intently. Finally, the Duke raised his head.
And who do you think could have done it?
I don't know, Your Grace. Until now, our region has been famous for peace and integrity. Apart from stealing chickens and fighting rogues, nothing unusual has happened around here. However, recently one of the Castellan soldiers was killed on the seashore. There was another soldier with him, but he disappeared. Maybe they didn't get along with each other. It is unlikely that the killer, if he is roaming through our forests, could attack a whole wagon train. I don't understand what may have happened, unfortunately.
Leandro, you have a reputation as a law-abiding gentleman and a kind owner of large estates.
The Duke said.
But still, I want to tell you, in view of the campaign that we are starting...
We're starting.
Leandro echoed in his head.
We won't have to be as picky as before. Perhaps the people who attack this Castellan's wagon train will be willing to serve us as well. By the way, what can you say about this guest of yours? Isn't he the officer king, Afonso himself, promoted for his military exploits? And also, as I now understand, made Castellan of Leiria?
Yes, that's him. The Castellan of Leiria, Don Daniel, served in the war in Africa with Afonso's army.
Leandro replied.
I must tell you our children are friends. My son and his daughter, they are the same age.
Is that so? Yes, your situation turns out to be quite delicate. I met Daniel a long time ago, and as I remember, He is a determined man and rules in the simplest manner. And, of course, is fervently devoted to the king.
That's right.
Leandro said with annoyance.
But I don't think he's a threat to us right now. First of all, he doesn't know anything yet. Raul and Francisco have just left to gather mercenaries. Secondly, he greatly values the good relations with my family. He loves his daughter madly and will do absolutely anything for her. I know he would prefer to keep the peace between his daughter and my family, or I don't know these people at all, Your Grace.
The Duke stared at his plate in silence. He had already imagined what might happen if the Castellan recognized him. He could only hope that the Castellan did not yet know about the siege of the castle of Vila Viçosa, or that they were still hoping to get to the Duke, unaware he had fled. Otherwise, Daniel would have to capture him right here at the Sinta estate. After all, it was under the jurisdiction of the Castellan as the local guardian of order. Perhaps the king had not yet sent an order to capture the Duke to Daniel or the other Castellans. However, he would definitely do it soon. Therefore, the Duke had less and less time, and it was necessary to hurry with the recruitment of mercenary troops. As long as the Duke's fortress held, the Lisbon garrison would be tied to it, but sooner or later the mystery of the Duke's disappearance would be revealed, and the garrison would return to Lisbon. What if the king had already ordered the Duke to be captured, and this Castellan were to find out? After all, the military are people of the same social circles, and they have the same interests and the gossip of their wives, too. Therefore, the only question was, did the Castellan recognize the Duke or not? If he did find out, the Duke would have to run away as soon as possible, but how to escape? After all, the messengers sent to Porto and other friends of the Duke must eventually return back here, to Sinta with their news, and it should happen very soon. Maybe even today.
What should I do?
The Duke continued to ask himself this difficult question, and he couldn't find an answer to it. Daniel rode along the forest road ahead of his soldiers. For some reason, the most interesting thoughts came to the Castellan precisely when he was riding, and this was one of those moments. The 4 recent events in Daniel's mind were now finding more and more in common and becoming more and more connected with one another. First, an attack on a convoy by unknown intruders. They didn't leave any traces behind. Even the place where they attacked could not be established. It was only clear that it happened near the edge of the forest, because the horses got out of the forest by themselves, obviously under the influence of very recent prodding. Second was the murder of the soldier Cristiano and the disappearance of his partner Jose. Such things happened from time to time in the garrison, and yet the reasons for such events usually became known immediately. As these strange occurrences continued to perplex him, he also considered the elderly gentleman with a well-groomed face who came out of the guest bedroom in Leandro's house. Who was this man who dared not respond to the greeting of the royal captain? Maybe he didn't understand military ranks and positions? Or was he a foreigner? Yes, foreigners visited Leandro often, but this man reminded Daniel of someone. Who? Where could Daniel have seen him before? Finally, Daniel found Nuno's behavior strange. This young man, usually so friendly, did not even come down to greet his close friend's father properly. So close that possibly, he would think more on that later, and Leandro himself did not invite Daniel to go inside the house. It seemed very easy for him to take on faith the Castellan's statement that he did not have time. Strange. Very strange. Don Daniel praised himself for not telling Leandro about other strange events of the last days and hours, but of course they too seemed important here. There is nothing, no reason, for ordinary people to devote time or concern to the affairs of the military. For example, Daniel didn't need to tell Leandro about the creature his soldiers caught in the forest. He looked like a man but was intensely black-brown, and his attire was profoundly different, a dress and shiny chains. Also, he spoke in such a way that no one understood him. The soldiers called him the Red Ghost, but Daniel himself still had not had time to deal with him. It was okay, he would deal with the stranger upon arrival back at the castle. He would figure it out. With that thought, Daniel whipped the horse with a flourish. And suddenly, unexpectedly, he shouted,
Braganza! It was Duke Fernando de Braganza!